Hey guys, just popping on here real quick. I want to get some stuff done. My schedule with class stuff has lumped a lot of the reading and replies early in the week, and then the rest of the week is kind of leisurely. So I'm still kind of getting used to the sort of lopsided schedule, and I don't know if I want to keep it really tense on those first 3 days, so I have like 4 leisurely days off, or if I want to spread the work around and get like a week ahead on some of the replies. I haven't decided yet. But I have found myself with a lot of free time today to do some work on stuff. I'm currently writing down the monster rules because they're very simple. They're basically just a translation of the Kung Fu rules in a way that you can make monsters and ghosts and demons and giant mutants for the game, which I think is a healthy place for a post-apocalypse game to be, because you want to have a lot of variety. You want to have that kind of Fallout effect where you don't know what's going to happen when you go into that subway station. Is there a huge robot in there? Is there a super mutant? Is there a bunch of giant cockroaches? Is there an alien that's going to transport you to the 50s? You want variety. So that's what I'm doing right now. Just doing what is effectively the monster manual rules for the game, at least the backbone of it. I'll do some examples later. I also, last week, had this moment of genius where I was just like, oh yeah, why don't I do that? And my big idea with that was, why don't I just steal the thing that Yoon Soon did, where they have a really characterful set of tables and really high impact setting writing kind of coded into those, and just like little lead-ins, so that you can know a lot about the culture of a given place just by throwing it together really quick and doing all your prep in like 10 minutes as a GM. So really high impact stuff that still, there's a lot to chew on there. And I realized that one of the things that's been looming over me since I wrote down the rules was doing the resource nodes and turning like raw metal into refined steel and stuff like that. I've had this thing over my head where it's like, okay, I don't want to do the thing that Axe did, where they went back to like the way Richard Cantillon does stuff, where he just makes giant lists of resources. D&D is kind of famous for that, but there's a lot of games where you just have these huge shopping lists of things you can get as a character, and they're not really connected to the central thesis of the game. Axe does a good job about making the game about capitalist ventures, so like, yeah, maybe you don't directly have a need for perfumes and furs, but you can use those as treasure, which help you advance, and you can also like arbitrage trade those somewhere else. So like, if you buy them, you can go somewhere else and make a profit off of selling them somewhere they're more expensive. Just typical classic arbitrage. And also, going from town A to town B in a monster haunted hellscape is an adventure. And actually, I've wanted that stuff for Lone Wolf Fist quite a bit, because I feel like the movement of goods in a post-apocalyptic hellscape is an adventure. It's something that, like, that's the start-off plot of Mad Max Fury Road, is they're going to take the milk, this truck full of milk, it's a milk truck, they're going to do a milk delivery. That's their heroic thing they're going to do, and they're mobilizing their war party for. Yeah. Like, and that brings, the reason that's so interesting is that it brings home just how little people have anymore. They've been reduced to almost like a caveman state. And I like that. I like that a lot, because I think that's a central and important conceit to the appeal of the post-apocalyptic genre. So I wanted to preserve it. But the thing that puts over your head is that I don't want to make a laundry list of a bunch of shopping goods and give the impression that you can go to a shop and buy sheet metal. That level of development and commerce requires a really sophisticated infrastructure, which, I mean, like our modern world has, but like they certainly wouldn't have in the post-apocalypse. So I've been wondering what to do with that, because on the one hand, I do need a more or less comprehensive list of resources and what they can turn into, and I need to be able to translate that into terms that players and characters and GMs care about, make them treasures to fight over, and super weapons, and just equipment for armies, and resources, and things like that. I need to be able to do that. And I need to do that, but that's really boring, and it requires a lot of, like, really heavy research in the actual, like, core costs of things. Because, like, in our world, we have this sort of developed market where, in addition to the raw cost of creating something, there's like a boost to that cost for labor cost, which fluctuates between nations. There's a further markup cost anytime that you transport it, or anytime it's resold between parties. So, like, if you have a middleman between between like a factory making, medical equipment and a hospital where it's going to be used. The middleman is going to facilitate the movement there, and that's going to create a markup. So you can't just, like, if you're doing research for how much it costs to make that sophisticated medical equipment, which you want to do, what I would want to do for this is, like, I can't just go and look at a pricing list from some hospital website. Well, how much did this cost? Because it's got all those other costs absorbed in there. And if you were a warlord in the post-apocalypse and you had a few geniuses and some plans and the raw materials and resources to whatever degree of refinement they can get, and you're like, make this thing for me, you would incur a different cost in pure resources. And the other costs that you have that are added on to that, like the cost of labor, is something that you would have to negotiate with uniquely among the parties that are making it for you. So if you have a genius that isn't like your slave or someone that is totally loyal to you, you've got to pay them something, and so the additional cost is based on how well you negotiate there. Like, and that those little things make something going wrong, something between you and the goal. That's the adventure. So with a role-playing game, you want to make certain that you capture as much of those steps that could go wrong between, like, the player and their ultimate goal, because the thing that lies between a player and their ultimate goal is the game that you play. It's the adventure you go on, it's the battles you fight, it's the enemies you make, it's the complications, the moral trade-offs, all the great stuff is between you and the end, the goal, the thing you want. Like, and the more, especially with post-apocalyptic stuff, the closer that end goal is to something that is a basic necessity, the more desperate and just annihilated and post-apocalyptic it feels. Like, think about, and this got me really hard because I dehydrate kind of easily. Again, going back to Mad Max Fury Road, think about how long it took that character to get a drink. He's in Act 2. He's gone through an entire war and this gigantic natural disaster and been in the middle of an exploding wreck and been enslaved before he gets one drink to go with this two-headed lizard meal. That's pretty fucking desperate. So yeah, especially with post-apocalyptic stuff, it's important. So my stroke of genius. This last week I was on a walk and I was thinking about something kind of tangentially related. I was like, okay, I want to have some cool super weapons in this game. I want to have, like, and I was thinking about, like, how do I want to do that? And I was like, well, I'll give every faction 5 or so, and I'll make, like, a super weapon, some kind of super armor, and then 2 weird things, like something that's not a weapon or armor, but is still really useful, like a crystal ball that can scry, or a cloak of invisibility. The stuff you'd see in the DMG, just with the random piles of magic treasure. And I could give 5 to each clan like that, and like really showcase, like, their philosophy and their strategic thinking and, like, the style of each clan by doing that. And then I thought a little bit further. I developed it a little bit further, and I was like, well, not just giving them those magic things, this is a game where you can create them, so I should make the shopping list for crazy stuff that you have to get together and the circumstances that you have to use, so that I can also give players an example and GMs an example of, well, if your players want to make super weapons, this is kind of the scale of stuff they have to get. And this gives you an idea of what the super weapons can do once you're done with them, and then how much work that is. And then I thought a little further about that, and I was like, if I took those crazy things and I made them individually desirable, just like marginally better than what you have. For example, instead of, like, if you want to make a magic sword, you have to base it not on a normal sword, but on a sword that's as powerful as a sword and a heavy weapon. So, like, kind of like a double weapon. So, like, you go from normal sword, and you do something to it to kind of, like, develop it and make it more powerful, and you get a really powerful sword, which isn't really magical, it's just really well made and powerful, and then past that, there's this magic sword that can cut through buildings. And I was like, so I could do that, and if I linked it to my magic number 7, I could have each magic thing be composed of 7 or so long-scale project roles, and then these 7 really important, well-developed ingredients. And then if I go one step further than that, like one step further back, I could make a shopping list of the things you need to make those mid-tier things. And again, just having 7 more or less mundane ingredients there. Like, well, how do you make that cool sword? Well, how do you make a normal sword? And then I realized that by doing it that way, I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You start with your super weapons at the very end, you work backward to the mundane ingredients, and then in those mundane ingredients, because these clans were able to make these super weapons, they not only have access to those ingredients, but also all the resource nodes and factories that refine them along each step. And so on both ends of that, and everywhere through it, I get something that tells me about the clan. This last step tells me about their aspirations and their ideals and their strategy and like their philosophy. This first step tells me about the raw resources they have. And this middle step tells me two things. It tells me like what kind of factories and what kind of industrial things they have to make these magic weapons, and like what the warlords are doing with those things. And it also tells me what the shopping list in their area looks like, what is readily available and traded by the people that are making these things. So I don't have to make just some giant shopping list of random things that come to my head. I can focus it and make that an expression of the culture and the climate of each one of these clans. Right? So I have not started on that work, but that template's in my head now. And it's such a good idea that like my hands were trembling after my I was like, oh my god, I've got to write this down. So I've got it written down in a notepad, and I'm immortalizing it here because like I've got to do it that way, right? And when you think about it, that's really just a development of the way that Yoon Soon did it. I don't know how popular that RPG book is with anyone else, but if you don't have it, you really should grab it. It's like $20. Go get Yoon Soon. It's a really wonderful example of that same thing where the culture of the areas you go to is encoded in the encounter list and the prep tables really nicely. And there's a reason to go to any one of those places, and there's an experience that you have going to all those places. It doesn't take a lot of reading, but there's all these really impactful tables and all these really rich like nodes of content and characters, and it's all really straightforward and really easy to game. Like you can immediately. I've run Yoon Soon content by just opening the book, rolling on some tables while I'm talking with the players and characters and role playing, and then filled out all of the content around them and the whole city they're in. They have all these like rich plots and things and characters going on. So it's that, but it's different enough that I don't feel like it's just plagiarism. But for real, you guys need to get Yoon Soon. It really is fantastic. So yeah, and I realized after doing like writing that thing down with the super weapons that I can do it for a lot of stuff. For example, I could have iconic monsters, like legendary monsters that are the things that are like the 7 banes of each clan, and that will give me kind of an encounter list of the stuff that's there. I could have 7 family archetypes that will give you an idea of the kind of families that are there. You can do it with a lot of stuff. You could have like name lists for each clan, and then I was like, this is perfect. This is what should be in the lores, because that way whenever you get the lore of one of these things, you have a whole culture and a whole idea of like where you come from, what your feelings on things are, like what motivates you, what history looks like to you. So, and it's not like all that stuff's really intuitive and quick and poppy and easy to use. And that is a pretty big chunk of content stuff I still have to write. Like, there's still an intimidating amount of stuff to fill all those points out with. But, like, it's better. It's more focused, and that template gives not only me something that I can just kind of look to and kind of reorient myself towards the best and highest impact writing, it also gives me something I can tell new GMs within this game, because part of the reason I'm so careful in the writing of Lone Wolf Fist is because it's a product that, even if you're not a game player or an RPG or anything, if you just pick this up off the shelf and this is your first RPG, it needs to be able to teach you how to do RPGs. And teaching someone to focus their prep efforts towards the best game impact is really a critical thing to teach new GMs. So I'm really happy with this idea. I'm not working on it right now, but I did want to immortalize it so that anytime, if I ever need to come back and like remind myself, what the hell was I talking about, I can come and get this really nice, this little spiel that I'm going on and remind myself. I'm busy enough that like even an idea this good could knock out of my head, so I've done everything I can to make sure that I'm giving myself a reference for it, so I never really forget. There's a couple of things I want to do this week in addition to that. I pitched the idea on the Discord that I would start doing like an e-boot camp for new GMs for here. because the patrons, all you guys, you have access to the most recent playtest document. I think it's going to replace the iBleed whenever I get it all together and get it in a nice finished state. So you have the opportunity to do early playtesting. Now, we're missing some important chunks, like we're missing the Gupt Kala and a few other things. But for the most part, like, a lot of the game is there, and you could reasonably playtest what's there and have a great time, like I've been doing in my little in-house playtest that I've been doing for this. So one of the things I wanted to do, hopefully like today or tomorrow, like this week really soon, is I want to do a little e-boot camp where I take you guys aside and I just say, okay, like if you need an NPC, here's what the different degrees mean, here's different ways those manifest in the game, here's how you can prep that really quickly. And I want to do that with every content rule that I've made so far. The resource nodes, you guys might not know how to use those or how they'll best manifest in the game. I want to go through it. The horizontal and vertical content and the way you make orthogonal content, all that stuff needs to be discussed so that you can, because like in a role-playing game you have interesting places and interesting events, and that's really all those are. Horizontal content is just interesting places where interesting things are happening and there's a reason to be there. There's risks and rewards to being there, and there's engaging stuff, NPCs and things to explore, and that's horizontal content. And I want to have like a discussion on how that works and like what you can put there to make it really engaging for Kung Fu demigods, which is what the characters are. And then there's interesting events, like plots, like the plots not of the GM plotting like a novel-like structure to the way the game is going to go, like narrative-wise, but the plots as in the plans and schemes of characters in the world and the events that are going on. And those things have a dynamism that kind of pulls itself away from the more static, like location-based stuff from horizontal content. And I need to discuss with you guys, like, okay, well, I've got some stuff written down for that. How do you use that? Because, and a lot of you, I imagine most of you, especially on the Patreon, are not brand new to role-playing games. You've ran games before, you've played them, you've been in them. Like, you know what it means whenever the GM, like, introduces a plot hook. You know what it means whenever there's something going on that doesn't necessarily have something directly to do with your character. You get what it means to be embroiled in the intrigues of things. And really, horizontal content is the dungeons, and the vertical content, all of that stuff is that other stuff, the intrigue and the warring armies and the invasion and the plot to kidnap the princess, all that stuff is vertical content. And importantly, it isn't required for players to interact with it. Like, even within those rules, like, I point out that this is stuff that the players don't have to get involved with, but if you introduce it, there's a consequence to ignoring it. If they ignore the whole there's an invading army thing, then the army's going to invade unopposed or lightly opposed. And there's a lot you can do with that. You can do an invading army, and you can do it on different time scales. You can lash it to different speed of scenes. So, like, if you have a montage scene, which is a slow political takeover of one place by an invading political power, you could do that and lash it to montage scenes so that that's something that, like, kind of drips content at the players and slowly shows the change of things. And that's wonderful, and you can do that, and they can kind of have a jumping on point whenever it becomes obvious to them if they want to, and get embroiled in it and maybe change it or make it worse, and have a hand in shaping how that turns out ultimately. And like, when you make horizontal content like that, you have to make certain that you realize, like, not to over prep any one of the boxes in it, because it could fall over like a house of cards, and that's supposed to happen. It's supposed to be much like if the players go into a dungeon, they're supposed to kick down the doors and clear out the monsters, and all the content that's in there is supposed to leave aside from the architecture itself. The architecture of a vertical content thing is a much more generalized plot. The dungeon, as it were, the walls and rooms are more like the steps that a plot would have to take to manifest. So in the case of like a political takeover, it would be, you have to start spreading propaganda and seed in spies, and then you have to corrupt core officials, and then eventually you do a more overt takeover. And so, like, you could reuse that same general, like, you could use the structure of that, like, you could reuse a dungeon by filling it with different monsters, and just change the names and faces of the people involved, and it would manifest differently because the players interact with it at different points, and it's being engaged with in a different way. So like, that's all stuff that's not obvious from the rules, but that's all stuff you can do. But additionally, in addition to that, you could do something faster. Like if you linked it to, instead of linking to montage scenes and making it a gradual thing, if you linked it to action scenes, you could make it a single battle in a war between different armies. And so every action scene, something huge is happening. There's a new battle being fought, and the players can interact with that while they're on the battlefield fighting around. The battlefield they choose to go to, the horizontal chunk they choose to go to, determines what parts of the battle they can influence, which is a cascade effect on the rest of it. And again, that's great. It's like running a war and a battle is something that's kind of a holy grail of RPGs, because they have such a strong association with war games. Like, they have a big history of that. But the difficulty is the birth of RPGs was breaking away from the war game model and making the rules much more specific and much smaller, so that you could enjoy a smaller group in more detail. So going backwards and lavishing all that detail on armies that are meant to be large and abstract has always been an issue, and I ran into it in a lot of games where I wanted to put wars in there. And this is the first system that I've found that combines the elements of other different games that did work. Like the War Combat and Axe is a much broader view stuff, and they have a version that allows you as an individual to go in and just fight like a normal battle and have an influence on the larger battle. But there's like this wall of abstraction between it that isn't really satisfying. Whereas the stuff in Heroes of Battle, which is a 3.0 or 3, I think it's a 3.0 product for 3rd edition D&D, for those of you I'm losing with this, has a box structure similar to the vertical content, where it's more like a flow chart of events, and the players are assumed to have a non-critical role in the overall movement of the battlefield. You pre-decide the outcome of the battle, and the players have different kind of adventure paths they can take through it, which again means that they are less important because they can't influence the whole thing. But for real, D&D characters are extremely powerful, and they should be able to influence the whole thing. You should be able to kill the Lich in the opening salvo and then have the undead start falling apart. That's a thing that should be possible. And if you plan it like they tell you to do in Tome of Battle, then you have to fight against the player's natural abilities within the game to do stuff like that, and it turns into a railroad inevitably. So there are good ideas in it, but the overall execution doesn't translate into actual gameplay. And my system is supposed to do both. You're supposed to be able to get the best of those both worlds. That's something that could probably use some examples. Flash different scenes. Anyway, so that e-boot camp is the thing I want to start doing. I need to make a little action list of stuff that I need to describe. Actually, I think I'm just going to go on the Discord real quick and ask people what they want to get described. In addition to offering suggestions, so I have like a little list of that. And then I'm just going to... I don't want to write a script exactly. I like this extemporaneous speaking, because it's a lot easier. And as you can tell, I'm not a guy that does a lot of long-scale planning. But like, you know, when it comes to the boot camp thing, I want to kind of talk to you like I'm talking to you now, where it's a little more raw and it's a little more genuine, and I don't want to have too strict of a... I don't want too much... what am I going on here? I do want to avoid this, where I'm just kind of stuck for words, but like, I don't want a script. I don't want to develop it like it's a show. I want to bring you guys through this kind of like just talking to you about it. But I do need at least to hit the high points of like how to convey this information, how to do it well, and they might go through iterations. I might do like, this isn't a final product thing. Like everything on this Patreon, it's kind of like assembling a car while you're driving it. So it's a learning experience, and it's an ongoing process of making the kind of game we want to see. So they might go through iterations. It might be like Boot Camp V1. All right, that didn't work as well as I liked. So Boot Camp V2 is all of that, and then we add some more lessons that we learned from Boot Camp V1. So we'll see. But yeah, doing a series or doing one big e-boot camp thing, just so that you guys who have the opportunity to use the full playtest can get to it immediately and start writing your own content. One of the things I love about RPGs is that fans can make content that is as high quality or higher quality than the original creator. I think I have a good imagination. I think I'm a decent game designer. I think that I'm making a cool product, but I'm not as smart as all of y'all combined, and I don't have any one of your imaginations. I want to see what you can do, and I want your tables to be able to see what you can do. I want you to be able to share that stuff, not just with me so I can market it, but with everybody who's interested in this. Put it on blogs, you know, go and post it on forums. That's what I want to see. I want to see people excited about going into the post-apocalypse with Kung Fu demigods and punching it. That'll be cool. And I want to do that now so we can do that on the sort of smaller scale that Lone Wolf Fist has, so that when it comes time to do that on a cosmic scale with the kooky Ashura's Wrath, super Goku power levels of All Above Heaven, we not only have the ability to do that on this scale, but like we have a good bedrock, a good launching point for the bigger stuff that's going to happen. Like the One Punch Man getting, you know, Saitama punched into the moon kind of stuff. I want to be able to do that, and I want to be able to do it fluidly, and I want to be able to do it in a way where if a city goes away, like a whole city worth of content in a battle, I want that to feel satisfying, and I don't want it to just be like, bye content. There's a place for that, I think, to some degree, but like I want, and I think the seed of what I want is in the kind of staggered Cataclysm rules, where you punch a building and then it slowly starts falling over in stages. That's kind of what I want. I don't want it to be like I shoot the planet and it'll blow up in 5 minutes. I want it to be I shoot the planet, it'll blow up in 5 minutes, and the planet is slowly falling apart around you while you're battling with your arch nemesis. Like, even at its fastest and most explosive, I don't think DBZ ever really just vaped a planet. I think they gave you some payoff to it collapsing around you. So there was a big consequence whenever you went and annihilated content. It didn't die quick. It had a drawn out death, and that made for cinematic stages to have battles over. And I think that might be the secret spice to really bring in that All Above Heaven stuff. I don't know yet. I've had my hands full with Lone Wolf Fist for a while, so you've got big dreams, and I think that if we have a really solid bedrock of interacting with the world and the scale of fights and scaling fights up and down and all that stuff and blowing stuff up, I think we have really good bedrock to all that stuff, then All Above Heaven is going to be a game like there's never existed before. You know, something that actually is like what Exalted was supposed to be, something that is Ashura's Wrath, but you can do it at your table with your friends whenever you want, and there's no quick time events. You get to have every moment of that as full and satisfying gameplay. That's a compelling vision. Like that's some stuff I want to bring into the world. Anyway, I'm bordering up on 30 minutes here. I didn't mean for this to go on quiet. This is supposed to be a 10-minute thing, but you know me, I verbose. And I got my coffee. You know me and my coffee. Oh, anyway, yeah. So I did all that stuff. The caffeine's kicking in big time. I don't know if you can tell. I'm gonna get on the Discord. I think there was something else I wanted to say, but I'm drawing a blank right now. Oh well, not a huge deal at the moment. So that's stuff you can look forward to in the very near future. Probably gonna see these monster rules today if I get a chance to finish them. They're almost done. They're not complex. And after that, like little things like there's the venom rules or the poison rules I want to do real quick. A couple other little things I'm gonna try to get out today. And then I'm gonna get on Discord, talk to you guys, do an e-boot camp, and yeah, keep rolling along. I do want to give you an idea of like how the Gupt Kala are shaping up. I redid them from my initial idea and added a lot more of the old way the secret arts worked into them, and have kind of a more comprehensive and a more generalized toolkit approach. So right now where those are is I'm looking at them, I'm reconsidering them in context of how you level up in this game, because it's only tied to techniques, and the original version of Gupt Kala was going to be just have them as techniques. That's a little too limited, I think. Like that doesn't feel quite right. So I'm now reconsidering like how the level up system works. Not too much. I want to keep it wed to the stuff you learn, the kind of kung fu you learn, but I need to make space for the Gupt Kala there, and I need to make space complexity-wise for them on starting characters, because they're bigger and they're more complex than an individual technique, and so I don't want to overwhelm brand new players with them. It's one of the unfortunate chunks of the learning curve. So that's where those are right now. They're coming, but like I got to be careful with them. In any event, I want to get this just under 30 minutes, so I will talk to you guys later.